we'll be crystal clear where we think the value is and where we fit that value. We like nice little $10 million legacy businesses that have no e-commerce presence coming to us. They have budgets, they have infrastructure, they have antiquated workflows, but they have some level of workflow. Those are really attractive businesses to us.
I'm the CEO founder of Ambaum. I have a background in consulting. I used to work for one of the big consulting agencies, Pricewaterhouse. Left that space, ironically went out and recreated my own little consulting agency. 8 years, also had a number of other paths. I was a merchant, so sold things online, still have a little store. Then created this agency to really kind of scratch my own itch. I wanted to build a bunch of different projects online, and I taught myself development, but knew I needed to hire developers to get some significant projects done. And so from that, we kind of got into Shopify, and then that's how David and I reconnected. And I'll let David kind of tell his story now. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, David Stober. I actually come more from kind of the brand and merchant side. Ambaum was actually my development agency when I was running my own stores. So we, when I exited my last deal, we thought, man, this is a pretty good alignment in terms of having some relevant scar tissue and experience, kind of on the merchant side. But longtime merchant, 2009, Magento, building my own small print packaging company. Made the leap in 2014 to this new awesome platform called Shopify Plus. So I guess I was one of the guinea pigs. So I was one of the first 50 brands on the platform. So grew my business from 14 all the way through 2019 when I exited my business, and then jumped on board with Ambaum. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. One of the things I think we differentiate ourselves is we do kind of, and this isn't just lip service, I think we do kind of view the world through a merchant's lens, right? So not everything is, hey, let's just go code our way out of this. It's let's go think about what's in the best interest of the merchant and basically think about what that path looks like over the next 3 months, 6 months, year. And, just be aware of the fact that there's other things that contribute to this in terms of where the merchant is from a capital raising perspective, where they are from a growth perspective. And I think that's the thing that I kind of double down on when I talk to merchants.
For us, there's 4 that we fall into, in terms of where we specialize. And so the first is we do a lot of theme builds. We built, if you go all the way back, Shopify Theme Kit with Online Store 2.0, we've got our own custom theme that we can build. And that's what a lot of our merchants are looking for, especially on the plus side. They want to differentiate themselves from just a regular, off-the-shelf theme. And so, to wrap it all up, that's it. David and I, when we, as we step back, we say, okay, hey, we're a outsourced kind of CTO and consultant for our merchants who can also execute on development, because we really see that as the number one kind of stumbling block that our merchants run into. But to actually go in and code, that's a really high hurdle for an entrepreneur that is trying to wear a lot of hats.
Do you have a library of themes, or is one certain theme that Ambaum offers?
It usually comes in the form of, are we going to use an existing theme that they're already using? Are we going to use an off the shelf and modify it? And it's really based upon budget, right? We're not going to push, fast forward to, hey, you got to go build this new theme from the ground floor up, because that just, quite frankly, doesn't work for every single brand. I mean, oftentimes you can make a strong case for doing it over the course of a 6 or 12 month kind of window. But out of the gate, that's not that's kind of a prescriptive, hey, just go build this the right way from the ground floor up. And that just we don't live in a prescriptive world. So usually their theme, which is usually Frankenstein, off the shelf theme, or a theme from the ground floor up.
Got you. What percentage of clients that you work with come to you with a Frankenstein store?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because this gets into the framework of how we look at our merchants and where they're at in their life cycle. So as we've evolved, up the stack to really kind of focus on Shopify Plus, what that means is we get fewer and fewer totally brand new startups that are just trying to figure it out, you know. And sort of the exception is maybe if they're well funded, like they've raised, seed round or significant amount of capital, or they're like a spin out, which we've done this a few times, of from a larger kind of conglomerate or overarching brand that's then deciding to launch a new store, and they know that they need experienced developers and they need to get rolling fast. But in general, our merchants that come to us have a store.
Gotcha.
Where they're kind of at in their life cycle is, and from a revenue perspective, where we, kind of that $1.5 million mark when they're getting to it, that's, what they've, in their journey, they've kind of grown up with, they've DIY'd it, right? Like they started off, they threw a theme out there, they built a store, got some traction, probably went for some freelancers or a friend of a friend to do a little bit of development work. They kind of hacked around. Then they quickly kind of realized, like, hey, this is more than, I'm over my skis a little bit here. Like, I don't have the support that I need to do all these things, like build landing pages for these new marketing initiatives, set up B2B, go ahead and integrate subscriptions or customize ship, on and on. There's all these things that show up. And that's at that kind of inflection point is where that's our perfect fit from a customer. Like they've endured enough pain to know what they don't know. And then then they're very receptive to an agency like us.
So you're working with your ideal customer profile at this point is a brand that's like earning right between 1 and 1.5 million. They've kind of,
that's on the low end, I would say. Like
Yeah.
we go all the way up to 40-50 million.
Yeah.
Okay, on the low end, got you. So that's like when you would start to work with the brand.
Yeah, that's right.
Got it.
Yeah, usually it's, the wheelhouse for onboarding is 1 to 1.5 or so, even bigger, but kind of getting on to Shopify Plus. And, I think our bread and butter really is kind of that 5 to million to kind of like 25 million. If I had to take a step back and evaluate ourselves, I think that's where we'd add the most value, because usually in those types of organizations, it's a little bit kind of hacky. Sometimes they have an e-commerce manager. Sometimes we're working with the brand owner or the entrepreneur. There's a lot of gaps. And I think, because of our backgrounds, we kind of know what those gaps feel like and how we would prioritize and who we would prioritize. Certainly above, say, 25 million, 35, 40, we get a little bit more specialized when it's really just hardcore technical. Let's go build this backend connector or do a bunch of API work or do a bunch of work on subscription. That's where we get a little bit more specific. But I think, that 5 where they have budget to kind of 25 is where we add a lot of value. Below that, we'll work with brands that come to us that are pre-revenues. But probably the simplest way to put, to kind of address that is that we have to really believe in the product, right? Like we have to have some affinity towards it. We got to think it has legs. We got to understand that, the people that are backing it, how it's funded, those types of things. And we'll go take some swings, right? Like, we're not a studio where we're going to invest our own time for equity or something, although that's presented to us often. We still are investing. We're taking a client and saying, we have this book of hours and we're going to turn other clients away for it. So we really do have to believe in it.
Got you. So if we look at the kind of the bread and butter segment, brands that are doing 5 to 25 million, what are 3 things that those merchants can do typically to improve their store?
We could give some very granular answers, but when David and I were kind of kicking this question around and thinking of it, it was a really good exercise because when a brand comes to us, we like to tell them like, hey, your store is if you think of it like a funnel, if the store is kind of the bottom of the funnel, if you think of the top of the funnel as everything feeds into it, it's all of your different marketing initiatives. And that could be paid advertising, SEO, affiliates, referrals, in-person events, social. You think about all these things, they all cascade down into your store. And that was never more evident than during the pandemic. These companies that could have an online and offline presence were now forced to, hey, we need to think of everything as running through our in-person store. And so, when we think about what moves the needle, we like to step back and say, okay, hey, what are you doing from a design and funnel perspective? And so what that means is, you as a merchant, when you think about your store, how do you, number one, benchmark against your competition? How does it look? How does it feel? When's the last time you did a redesign? What's the customer journey from the homepage, collection page, product detail page, cart, checkout? What do you have? Have you added from a subscription or maybe an upsell perspective? So how we look at it is like, you should be thinking about a redesign or reimagining the look and feel of your site probably every 3 to 4 years online. And that, there are sort of fundamental architectural reasons why you should think about that. Like, for example, Shopify will release new updates like Online Store 2.0. There'll be speed enhancements. There'll be things that will just structurally be important for you to reimagine your sort of store foundation. But then aesthetically, you should always be looking at it because it's not only how does it look and feel to your customer, but the look and that feel will show up as data-driven metrics in things like Google Analytics. You'll be able to look at your conversion rate. You'll be able to look at your average order value. You'll be able to look at your percentage of customers that are on subscription. You can look at your churn rate. All these things that you can sort of mathematically prove all get reflected in the fact that what is your look and your feel and your design, and then that funnel from the customer perspective. So it's a long way to say where a lot of our competitor agencies will try to dive in and focus on one or two little things. David and I, when we have a conversation with the merchants, we like to say, hey, let's step back and think about what's your goal? What are you doing? And what are some of the really low-hanging fruit that you can think about to move the needle?
Yeah, and I to add to that, I think you viewing that through the lens, again, as a merchant, 3 months, 6 months, a year is really, really important because, sometimes, brands will come to us and it'll be March timeframe and they're, hey, let's go scrap this and rebuild it. And you're like, well, God, your metrics are pretty good. What are you trying to accomplish? We're all busy enough in our space right now. We don't need to go make up reasons to go burn a bunch of hours, right? That's just what we need to do is find those little jewels and find that low hanging fruit and see, basically, do right by the client and actually view it through their lens as opposed to basically just viewing it through the lens of a typical agency. So Chad's completely right where, it's not just taking a look at the whole picture. And I think that's the unique part of what we try to do and what we try to communicate. And sometimes we'll push back on big projects because we're like that. We just don't see the value in it.
So if the analytics and the numbers look good, you might be disinclined to kind of tear it down and rebuild it.
And it gets back to Chad's benchmark, right? Where should they be? You can have a health and beauty brand and they're converting at, they got an 8 or 9% conversion rate and they're talking about rebuilding their store. You're going, what are you doing? Why don't you throw 2x the amount of traffic to it and go find where that plateaus and where that doesn't return as opposed to scrapping the website because your benchmark, you're way above benchmark. And quite frankly, that's cute and it's great if you're way above benchmark, but actually it's pretty damn inefficient too, right? Where you should probably get to benchmark because you're probably leaving a lot on the table, right? So, I mean, that's kind of a little analogy, but sometimes the numbers say, yeah, you're doing things right. You maybe just need to go throw more traffic and maybe uptick your average order value through some sort of upsells by, powered by Rebuy, some kind of thing, right? So that's what we try to really impress upon our clients.
Awesome. Let me just ask, do you have any kind of examples or any clients that or any case studies or kind of any success stories that you've been able to take this approach and help a client or two really move the needle?
Our core is direct to consumer brands, which obviously is what Shopify is kind of built on the back of. And for that, it's apparel, it's some furniture, we've had some pets clients. It kind of runs the gamut. But what we've kind of started also to carve out a bit of a niche is in the parts and then automotive space, which has obviously been a little bit tough from Shopify's perspective because they haven't had a super robust B2B offering. but that's changed or changing. They've actually released some really great new B2B APIs, and there's some work we've been doing with a lot of like tractor parts, automotive parts, businesses that are really sound kind of stodgy and have been around for a long time, but they've never really unlocked like a way to sell direct to consumers. So that's another area of focus for us, that even though it may not be something that you immediately kind of click and think, oh, this is exactly what should be on Shopify, it's kind of paradoxically one of the biggest opportunities, because these brands don't have a real strong e-com presence internally, and they really need help to try to figure out how to unlock that avenue of setting up a store, and then not really getting their their business to business, whether it's wholesale kind of customers, to just figure out a way to order online instead of like using emails and spreadsheets, faxes, and all sorts of crazy.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. These kind of like, I mean,
legacy. Yeah, legacy.
Yeah, that's the way to put it. That's right.
Yeah. And bringing it forward into like this new era of e-commerce. I mean, that's super smart.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, with Shopify, it's so interesting because you have these, everyone wants to talk about these super sexy, high-flying, direct-to-consumer, CPG brands or, consumer brands. But, where we see a lot of growth for Shopify and for us as an agency over the next probably 5 years is with these forgotten about legacy businesses, parts, traditional like bakeries, or all these businesses that are furniture. They're going to be viewing the world through the lens of what happens next time we have a shutdown or a pandemic or something like that. So like there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of high touch, and there's a lot of thought in and around Shopify, but really business specific and focused as well. It's about understanding the full scope of the business and how the business is set up, how it operates, the workflows in the back ends, what the connectors look like, what disruption e-commerce is going to have on their sales team. These are all like super relevant discussions that we think with Shopify 2.0, with B2B, with the pending headless environment with hydrogen and oxygen. These are all going to lend themselves to legacy businesses getting on the platform, and or bigger businesses expanding on the platform and being stickier and more customizable in the future, so they would never have to leave Shopify because it doesn't do what they needed to do.
Wow, interesting strategy. That's really cool. Kind of just refreshing some of these like older legacy businesses. I just read something about Toys R Us. Remember them? Yeah, I guess they kind of crashed and burned when like online shopping first hit, because they didn't, take it seriously, and they were kind of, fork in the road, and they stayed legacy without kind of bringing their business online and really taking it seriously. So, and like I love your point about like a lot of these shops have learned something from the quarantine, the pandemic. It's like we don't want to be left behind should that happen again. So let's get a shop that's optimized, that's got a customer journey that like is personalized, and so that they can survive and thrive if should that happen again.
Yeah, we certainly want our fair share of super sexy CPG brands that we can point to and say, look, we basically rode them from 0 to $50 million in 3 years, which we have one right now that we can't necessarily talk about. That is just mind-boggling. But we'll be crystal clear where we think the value is and where we fit that value. We like nice little $10 million legacy businesses that have no e-commerce presence coming to us. They have budgets, they have infrastructure, they have antiquated workflows, but they have some level of workflow. Those are really attractive businesses to us. And we think it lends itself to the folks that we've talked to and worked with in the past that have wide catalogs, lots of upsell opportunities, lots of merchandising opportunities. And those are the things that we're building a little niche for ourselves as an agency, right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of excitement and, attractive businesses and different opportunities to help merchants grow, what excites you about the future of e-commerce?
we also kick this question around, and I like to, kind of step back and look at where e-commerce was and where we're at now, and then where we're headed. And, if you go back, 20 years ago, selling a book online was like the most novel thing in the world. It's crazy. We take it for granted, right? But like Amazon was derided and ridiculed, and laughed at, frankly, for a long time. And then, we normalized e-com online. And then we went through so that was the early 2000s. And then we got in the 2010 period, and we kind of realized, okay, well, we need to figure out a way for these small businesses and other companies to kind of start up. And so then you had the Magentos of the world that you kind of went through what we call this on-premise phase, where you had to roll your own e-com stack. It was a lot of work. Like, it took a tremendous amount of energy just to get a store up and running. And then let's say the 2015 to 2020 era of SaaS and really dominated, not only just e-com, but like really the tech space. But e-com was a big winner here. And that's where Shopify has, kind of changed the game. Instead of making it, super difficult to get a store up and running, it's actually very egalitarian now. Like anybody can step up, and for literally $20 a month, you can start a store. And if you want to put the work in, within years, you can be in the 7-figure range from a revenue perspective. And so when I look at that, the lens of like where we've been to where we are now, it's actually quite a lot. Like, when you think about how much we take for granted. So what I think that means for the next, like, let's say 5, 10, 20 years is that, number one, we've kind of decided collectively that it's easy to start a store. So before, that was a barrier to entry. It was like, hey, I took a lot of work to start a store. So now that's not it. So now the competition has shifted up the stack. It's shifted up to what are the things I can do with my store to differentiate myself. And that could mean like my offline partnerships. What are the different channels I'm selling through? What do I have integrated into my store? Do I have subscriptions? Do I have customized shipping? Do I have B2B as an offering? Do I have SMS text messages? On and on and on. You need to think about what do you have from a stack perspective that really makes you stand out. And then this is not even touching like marketing and branding and all those other things.
And I think today's and the future's modern brand will have a stack that is going to be very pliable and fluid and ready to execute, because these opportunities, they just hit so quickly, right? Like, you have Crocs, which is kind of a dormant brand doing what it's been doing forever. Pandemic hits, and oh my God, all of a sudden they're everywhere, right? Like, so it's about, being ready for those marketing moments and those trends and those business opportunities with your tech stack. And, whether that's selling through social, or whether that's selling through SMS, whether that's selling through, some sort of like one click or retail, all these lines are blurred. And and the folks that will win in the future the folks that will win in the future will be the ones that can fight on multiple battlefronts. And, there has to be some source of truth though. And I think in our case, we think Shopify is that foundation and that platform for being that source of truth, where everything funnels into that: online, offline, retail, distribution. And yeah, like what Chad says, it's going to be crazy what's going to happen in the future. But I think what is going to be underscored is the fact that there are, people are going to be in a position where they actually have to think about everything. You can be an e-commerce manager, but you're going to have to think about retail sales. You're going to have to think about your social strategy, your engagement. And, for us, that's what's exciting for us, is because that's constantly evolving, and we get to be on the forefront of it with some really cool, awesome brands.
Interesting. How many of your clients would you say use social selling at this point?
I'm a little jaded. I think it's a lot more noise than anything right now. And it's cute, and people are surfacing products in different ways. But if you're talking about actually transacting on the various social platforms, we don't talk a lot about it, to be honest with you. Our brands are not. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
You think about social for a lot of our brands, it's kind of like top of funnel awareness. for a brand, like, this is another important point. You think about all these other platforms, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Amazon. I separate all of them out as renter platforms, owner platform. Those three I just named are your renter. If you're a merchant, you go on, you're walking on their turf, and they're going to take a toll, and a heavy toll. If you're on Shopify, you're an owner. That toll is small. You pay a very little percent, it's a very small percentage, 3% or less. If you're a plus, you're 2.15%. You pay, when you're on Amazon or you're on any of those other channels, if you're transacting, you're in the 10, 15, 20% range. Long term, that from a just inertia and gravity standpoint, every brand that you talk to wants to push their transactions to their store. They want to own their store. They want to own their customer. They want to own that data. So when it comes to social and social selling, I think it's fine from an awareness, letting people know, but it's not where our brands want to live and do, and breathe. They want to live on their own turf, and that's
Yeah. I mean, there's this idea of letting consumers and transact wherever they want to transact, but at the end of the day, our brands are still all about getting them onto their property and transacting on their property.
That's right.
And I just quite frankly don't see that changing a lot, because I think that inertia, like Chad described, will always be there.
And I want to build on this because I think it's a really important point. I mean, Amazon changed the world by making the world's most successful e-com customer-centric business. Shopify is able to compete with Amazon because they went and they changed the game and said, we want to make a merchant-centric business. And you may think those things are absolutely in tandem, but they're not, because what a customer wants and what a brand wants, merchant wants for their store, they aren't always one and the same. What might be a great customer experience on Amazon is not the same experience a brand or merchant wants to have for their customers. They want that experience to run through their own store. And I think that's going to be fascinating over the next 5-10 years as that plays out. And a lot of brands are kind of waking up to that.
Yeah, that's super, super exciting. I know that we're right at time here, guys. We'll definitely be on the lookout for more news from Ambaum here in the fall. Really appreciate it. Taylor, Chad, David, been a pleasure. Thanks again for just kind of making some time.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
You guys.
Okay.
Take care.